Okay, so this is probably relatively unexpected, but out of nowhere, here's this thing that we're talking about now. It's Transformers Prime. And so, I don't know, just a little background as to how this happened. This show was on Netflix for a while. It just left, like, today. So, Malik, I don't know, did you just get into this show recently? Because you recently told me about this show. I'd seen a couple episodes of it back when it was on television, back when it was being aired on the Hub. I caught an episode of season 1, and then way later I caught an episode of season 2, and couldn't really get into it. But having started it now and binged the whole thing, it's really, really great. But like, what is your history with this show, or did you just get into it fairly recently?
Okay, well, I got into this show when it first came out. I kept up with it while the first season was airing on the Hub, and the same thing with season 2. Now, I didn't keep up with season 3 completely. I think it got to maybe 2 or 3 episodes before the finale, and I binged the episodes of season 3 leading up to that, and then got caught up in time for when the finale aired. And I don't know how soon after the movie came out, but then I eventually saw that, and so I've seen the whole show in its entirety twice now, because I rewatched it again in preparation for our discussion on this. And even then, I just remember thinking the whole time I was watching it, this is what the movies should have been. Like, if you want to have it set on Earth, fine, but you don't need to make the protagonists the humans. We don't need, like, they can be our eyes in, but they don't have to be the focal point, or at the very least you can compromise and do it about 50-50, or I'd say more 60-40.
Yeah.
In favoring of the Autobots. That's how I see it with this show, where it was at least 60% focused on the Autobots at all times. And I really appreciated that. Now, I like the first 3 movies as guilty pleasures. They're just dumb, fun action movies that I'll throw on and rewatch once in a blue moon. But yeah, this is the definitive take on Transformers for me. This is what I point to whenever I want to get anyone who's not particularly into Transformers into the brand, into the franchise. I really love this show. Growing up, I want to say I was I was right in between middle school and high school, I think, watching at least a good chunk of this show. And I really enjoyed it. I think,
Wow.
I think the character dynamics are solid. I love the storytelling. We'll get into the specifics. But overall, I think this show is really great at giving us kind of standalone episodes while having little bits and through lines for each thing. Like, we'll introduce RC's arch nemesis Arachnid, and then we'll further that in later episodes and stuff like that, and then we'll introduce the Insecticons, and there's so much stuff going on throughout this show that they'll seed and then pay off later, and all of that is really cool. I love that Frank Welker and Peter Cullen, who played both Megatron and Optimus Prime in the original series, are back revoicing, and Frank Welker, he sounds so different. He doesn't sound at all like Megatron from the original series, and I actually really like that. There's a little more, I don't know if gravitas is the right word, but just it's not, I don't feel like it's filtered with any kind of auto-tune or anything, and I like his raw voice and his raw performance as the character. Yeah.
And I 100% agree with you in terms of this being like definitive. like, this is to Transformers what I would say Spectacular Spider-Man is for Spider-Man to me, where it's like, if you just want a really, like, relatively truncated version of, like, this is what's really cool about this property. Because this did for me with Transformers what Last Jedi did with Star Wars, where it's like, before I was able to enjoy some Transformers things, like outside of the movies, I would catch the occasional episode of other series, or like I said, the occasional episode of this, and I'd be like, okay, you know, it's fun, fighting robots, it's cool. But now watching this show, it's like, oh no, I'm suddenly interested in, like, the mythos, and, like, apparently the Transformers comics are really good. I'm gonna go try and find some of those comics now. I might go back and try to watch Transformers Animated, I think was the series that directly preceded this one. The one that kind of had, like, a Teen Titans sort of vibe to it. And, yeah, I'd heard good things about that show, but I'd always kind of just, for whatever reason, probably the movies, had a hard time really caring about the Transformers themselves as characters, or the whole Cybertronian conflict is like a thing to be invested in. But with this show, it's like, there's lore, and all of these characters are really compelling, and they're not just there to sell toys, and it's so great.
It really is great. I want to talk about the designs really quick. Get the kind of superficial stuff out of the way. I love the animation style, and I love pretty much all the designs. Bumblebee's is kind of a more simplified version of his movie design, and I like that. And I like the way his muscle car looks. And yeah, like they have the car doors as like wings on his back, and you know, he has the whole. He doesn't actually have like a face shield, but like his design is just they're clearly inspired by the movies when they make that design.
Yeah, well, find out later a face as we just don't realize that until the last episode of the show.
Yeah.
And
Optimus Prime. Oh, sorry. I'm just gonna say, yeah, Optimus Prime looks fantastic. He's got the samurai look. I think the look that they give him in the third season, also known as Beast Hunters, is just a little too bulky. I don't care for how insanely bulky that design is, but yeah, for the design he has throughout most of the series, I think is great.
Yeah, I think a really big, like, I noticed we gave him the jetpack thing, but I didn't think his design changed all that much. Or if it did, I must have just, like, sort of not picked up on it. But yeah, for the most part, like, it only occurs to me now that there's not really a single design in this show that I don't like. Like, there's some that I think are maybe out of place isn't the right word. But if I think about, like, Breakdown looks kind of weirdly... Like, Breakdown has this kind of unique look to him that I don't think is quite matched by anyone else. But everyone else, for the most part, like, they do the things, again, that the movies don't do, which is they very clearly have individual looks to them, and yet everyone still looks like of a team. And so maybe it's that Breakdown is like a former Autobot or a former Wrecker who then became a Decepticon, but all of the Autobots have... You'd never mistake any of them for each other, and ditto the Decepticons, but you can clearly see that there's kind of a unity there design-wise. And I don't know, like, everyone's character is conveyed nicely through design, and it's just, it's really smart and really cool.
I also like the weird kind of, like our kind of, like, vernacular and the way we talk just transferred into, in relating to robots, like, instead of, oh crap, they say scrap, or,
yeah.
When Bulkhead refers to how Megatron is dead, instead of saying he's pushing up daisies, he says he's pushing up lug nuts.
Yeah. Or,
I don't know, just that little kind of running gag of like how they refer to things in like a mechanical type way, I thought was really funny and a really nice touch.
And it's also because I don't necessarily think about it as a running gag, so much as it is just we're going like it's part of that treating the audience seriously, and it's like, of course these people would say things like that because they're not humans. Like, it's not. I feel like in another show you might have them just say pushing up daisies or whatever because we don't want to confuse people, because that's the regular like term. But no, that's not what these creatures would say. They're from a different planet. Their perceptions of things would be different. And so of course, like, the thing that runs them is the spark, not a heart. So whenever we have like a euphemism that would use the word heart, they always replace it with spark. It's like they didn't have to pay that much attention, but it's good that they did.
I would agree with that. I want to get my only major criticism of the whole show out of the way, and that's
oh boy, I feel what this is.
Oh, well, actually, yeah, it kind of is Miko. I wasn't thinking Miko when I said that. I was thinking about something. But yeah, I want to get this other thing out of the way first, and then we can talk about Miko. So, when we get the first episode, and Optimus lays out for the kids why they're on the planet and what happened to Cybertron, it doesn't match what Ratchet says later at the end of season 1. So, in the beginning, when Optimus is telling them what happened, he says Cybertron fell into war, and he and Megatron weren't on opposite sides, and said his ideals were corrupted, and then he turned to the dark side and became Megatron. And then when we get that story from Ratchet, talking about how he used to be Orion Pax, and he was a clerk at the Icon Hall of Records, he says that before the war even starts, Megatron clearly becomes the founder of the Decepticons, and Orion Pax becomes Optimus, the embodiment of good. Like, their roles are set for them before the war actually starts. That's what Ratchet says at the end of season 1. That doesn't match what Optimus said in the beginning.
Yeah, I think if you stretch enough, you could find ways to make those two things, like, gel together, but I guess maybe it's just, you know, nobody's perfect. We didn't have a complete vision of what we wanted that relationship to be earlier in the show. I don't know.
And it's we in most incarnation of Transformers, we play it as straight up good versus evil, kind of a basic yin and yang type thing. You know, like the Jedi and the Sith and that kind of thing. It's usually never like an Xavier Magneto type thing. We don't typically play it as two sides of the same coin, which is what it would be if they were fighting together and then later Megatron turned.
Yeah. And, like, you get the impression that they worked together, or that they were friends.
Yeah, like Ratchet says, like, he was kind of an advisor to Megatron before he turned to the dark side. But yeah, they weren't actually like fighting together and stuff. And
yeah, like the big thing there is that Orion Pax isn't a fighter. Like, it's after he becomes Optimus Prime that he even gets like into like conflict in that way.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my only big hang up, is that those two things aren't necessarily matched. And I think that like both situations fundamentally change the relationship for Megatron and Optimus. You wouldn't think about it in the same way. But moving on from that, let's talk about Miko. I kind of just want to let you go first.
Okay, you might as well, because I'm definitely going to be less harsh on Miko than I would have been without Beast Hunters, because I might as well say off the bat, you mentioned that it's a good thing that the humans aren't really the main characters, and that was kind of my worry going in, or not really a worry that I had going in, but like when I caught an episode or two of this show back as it was airing, like my perception of it was, okay, the humans are the main characters, and the Transformers are kind of, you know, accents to them. And a big part of that is, what's that sound?
Oh, sorry, hold on one second. Is it good now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, it's just, yeah, I wasn't necessarily worried going into this viewing that the humans would, like, take things over, but as I watched what little of the show that I watched in, as it was airing, a lot of the episodes I just happened to catch were the ones that were very human-focused, and so I was kind of under the impression that it would be like the movies were, where it's like the humans are the main characters and the Transformers are there as, like, accents. And I didn't know enough about Transformers as a franchise to assume that wasn't just the way it always was. Where, like, we put the robots on all the marketing because they're what sells, but really the story is about the humans. And I really think they struck the most perfect balance here possible, where all of the humans are very, very strong supporting characters who can carry their own episodes. But the Autobots, and even the Decepticons more so than they are the focus of the series, and that was really great. And the kind of downside to that, in regards to Miko specifically, is that she has a very clear arc where she grows to be more mature and, like, becomes more helpful instead of a hindrance. But because she's not really a main character, that has to be spread out over the whole 3 seasons. And so for seasons 1 and most of season 2, she's just insufferable. Like, it's insane. Like, oh god, like, she's not nearly bad enough for me to drop the show over, but it's like Thea and Arrow all over again. Which is like, because you get the impression that the writers, they want her and Jack and Raphael to sort of fit into different archetypes of kids who might be watching the show. So Jack is just kind of the everyman, Raphael is like the nerd, the sci-fi nerd, and she is sort of like the adrenaline junkie. And, like, there are moments where she's entertaining and charming, but it's just like they go overboard with it. And she does the same thing multiple times where they're like, stay here, we're serious this time. And she's like, nope. And she always causes more problems than she fixes. And it's just, it's too much. I was gonna get real mad over it until season 3 happened. And the awesome moment with her in the Apex armor, which came out of nowhere for me because, one, I was assuming, well, we start with, like, her saving Wheeljack in an earlier episode, which is great. And she and Wheeljack have, like, a great rapport. And I love at the start of that episode where the Wreckers are going on a mission. And it just cuts to Wheeljack. Ultra Magnus is like, what is she doing here? And it just cuts to Wheeljack, he's about to leave. And she's like, oh, hey, where you guys going? He's like, on a mission. He's like, oh, cool. Can I come? And he's like, sure. And it's... so that kind of... that avoids the repetition of someone told her to stay and she doesn't stay. It's like, of course, the one person who would be like, yeah, sure, come along, why not? And she had kind of proven herself at that point already. But what surprised me most is that I assumed that the Apex armor could even get onto a human. So when she does it, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. And then she has a great line where, like, Starscream still manages to throw her around a bit, and he's like, even something as invincible as the Apex armor can't protect the weakest of creatures, or something like that. And she just grabs him and she's like, protected you, didn't it? It's like with that one line of like, oh, Miko's suddenly awesome. That's great.
Yeah, that really was a great line. Yeah, my biggest issue with Miko is just how she was, as you said, constantly leaving the base to come along with the Autobots on missions, just to, you know, take pictures of it. And she's a massive liability. she can't, without that Apex armor or like some readily available Cybertronian tech, she's essentially a bug. And
although I will say, she doesn't like not contribute. It's not like she doesn't contribute anything early on, because you mentioned like the taking pictures with her phone, and like something kind of clever that we do is that in a couple episodes, like the pictures that she takes will actually help the Autobots or serve as like a neat little plot device.
Yeah, we do that a couple of times throughout the series, but I just mean in the fact that she goes with them on missions against their say-so, and almost gets herself killed every single time and compromises the mission every single time.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
And she acts like she's also a Transformer, like there's no danger in her going with them. And she gets mad at those temper tantrums when they tell her not to go, and it's like, you know why they're not letting you go. You could get yourself killed out there.
Yeah. And, I don't know, it's just... I feel like they had a clear idea where to go with her, and then they executed it well. And it's just like, getting there was a bit of a slog.
Do you have a favorite character in the show? Mine is RC. I'll tell you that right now. I love RC to death.
The characters are too good for me to pick a favorite, honestly. Okay. I can maybe narrow it down. Okay, I didn't even think about this. I really gotta think about this now. All I know is that as far as the Decepticons go, I can narrow it down to Starscream and Knockout.
I love Knockout's obsession with his finish and like the paint on his car and like how good he looks.
Yeah, like he's such a vain, like he's almost the comic relief of the Decepticons just because of how vain he is. Like he's always obsessed with like image, and that constantly gets him away. And like he's the showboater, and it's really funny. And like Starscream is really funny, and you get the two of them together, and it's hilarious.
Starscream is played by Steve Blum. He is one of the best voice actors in business. Played for some reason the only role that's coming to mind aside from that is Green Goblin and Spectacular Spider-Man, but he's played so many characters.
Well, the one that immediately comes to mind is, also, just because you were talking about Korra earlier and you've been watching through that show, he played Amon, so there's that.
Yeah, I forgot to mention Amon, yeah.
But the one that my mind always goes to when I'm thinking about, like, how versatile of a voice actor he is Guilmon from Digimon Tamers, where, like, okay, so Digimon Tamers, I don't recall if we've talked about that show, but...
Never.
Okay, it is a season of Digimon that I think is as good and as, like, it is tonally comparable to this show, and Steve Blum plays two characters in that show. One is a very sort of down-to-earth, serious, kind of threatening government agent guy named Yamaki, and he's doing kind of his Amon voice for that. And another one is he plays the main character's Digimon named Guilmon, who's kind of like this childish, like, literally a newborn, doesn't understand how the world works, innocent little creature. And he's got, like, this kind of high-pitched, sort of childish voice. And it's almost unrecognizable. Like, I can send you a voice clip of, like, that performance after we're done, and it's unrecognizable compared to Starscream or Amon. It's like, he has maybe some of the most range of any voice actor outside of, like, Frank Welker or Jim Cummings or someone like that.
Yeah, he did a great job, and, like, if you go online, you'll see that Starscream is the fan favorite of this show, just because we focus on him more so than any other Decepticon, even Megatron. Like, we spend more time with Starscream than any other Decepticon throughout this show, and I think that was a really interesting and bold choice, because he's by no means the main threat of the show. I like that we open with him killing one of the Autobots, but
yeah, and then he keeps on that up for the opportunity to present.
I'm sorry, you broke up, Nick. I didn't hear what you said.
Like, he'll keep bringing that up whenever the opportunity presents itself. Like, I'll have you know, I killed Cliffjumper, and it's like, shut up already. But at the same time, he is the only one who managed to successfully kill an Autobot, so he's kind of in the right to brag about that.
Well, we do know that Arachnid killed RC's first partner, Tailgate, on Cybertron.
No, yeah, but that's like a flashback. I don't know if
That's a flashback. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, like in terms of just what we're introduced to, like the opening scene of the show is a really cool fight with Cliffjumper, voiced by Dwayne Johnson, and we see him killed in the first 5 minutes of the show.
I know. Like, if you don't know what show you're getting into, then now you know immediately.
Now you know. So yeah, like Starscream, we see him like try to undermine Megatron over and over and over again, and sometimes he succeeds, but his reign never really even lasts or really even cements. Like, he has everyone calling him Lord Starscream for a large chunk of the first season, I believe, and then
Or
trying to, yeah, and then Megatron just keeps coming back, and that's one of the things I'm most impressed with this show is we keep killing Megatron, or almost killing him, and bringing him back, and he still feels threatening.
yeah, and it's like, okay, I'm not sure if I agree with you that we spend more time with Starscream than the other Decepticons, just because there is a big chunk of the show, like several episodes where he's not around. But I think it feels like we spend the most time with him, or get to know him the best, just because he's so dynamic, and he's constantly changing, and it's like, or like his position at least is constantly changing, and things are never the same with him from one moment to the next. He's always doing something new, or his circumstances are always different from where they were before. Whereas with the Autobots and the Decepticons, they, for the most part, have a status quo. Like, they have their base of operations, they'll go out, do a mission, they'll entangle with each other. Whereas, toward the end of Season 1, I want to say, Starscream is like, alright, you know what? I'm just gonna go off and do my own thing. And then he's off doing his own thing, and so he's really interesting as like an X Factor. And then it's not until late in Season 2 where he's like, alright, I'm back with the Decepticons.
And I really didn't think that they would get me to buy that Megatron wouldn't just annihilate him for all the time Starscream has either tried to kill him or undermine his authority. And they made me buy it.
Yeah. Yeah, for that episode where does the mind link with Starscream, which first of all has one of my favorite like gags in it, where it's like, "All hail Starscream," and he's doing like dance moves, and he's like, "One more time," and it's just wild. But yeah, it's like that episode, the relationship between the two of them is so fascinating.
It really is. I like the moment where Starscream is contemplating leaving Megatron in a cave after it collapses, and he's like, "I could just leave you to die, but then again, you have survived worse, and if your lackeys got you out, they would take credit for your rescue, and you blame me for getting trapped in there in the first place." He's like, "Darn it, I just can't win, Megatron!" And Megatron is standing there looking at his memory, and he's like, "For future reference, try not thinking aloud."
And it's like, and it's because the impression that I get of Starscream and Megatron's relationship going purely off of, say, the 80s cartoon is that Starscream is just power hungry and he doesn't care about anything but himself. And Megatron understands this, but keeps him around because it's more convenient, I guess, to have him on your side than working with the Autobots or off doing his own thing. But here, like, I get that that's true, but also in that episode where Megatron has a line where he's like, was any of it real, Starscream? Like, any of it? Like, I don't know, I get the impression from that line, like, Megatron honestly kind of was attached to Starscream, at least a little bit, or felt like Starscream had some real respect for him, and it bothers him that, like, their entire relationship was a lie. And I feel like after that episode, things only get, like, more interesting between them. Where, like, in the last episode, when Megatron dies, and you see him die, like, Starscream is about to, like, just throw himself at the Autobots to avenge him. And I'm like, there's no way Starscream could benefit from doing that. I think he's honestly just sad or, like, angered that Megatron died. Like, there is a part of their relationship that is a genuine attachment between the two of them. And it's really weird. And it almost contradicts the rest of their relationship, but that just makes it more interesting to think about. And then you throw Knockout into the mix, who kind of has the same thing. And I'm like, some episodes, I almost get the impression that Megatron is like Knockout and Starscream's beleaguered dad, and like Starscream and Knockout are just bickering siblings.
Yeah, man, I really like that we start the show in a place where like all Starscream really cares about is himself and like being the leader of the Decepticons, and then we end the show with him like genuinely caring about Megatron and devastated that he's dead, and like ready to pretty much commit suicide to attempt avenging him.
Yeah. And Shockwave has to be like, no, what are you doing? Don't be stupid. And
Starscream's like, curse you on your logic.
Yeah. And Shockwave is also great. Like, that's the thing, like, just each character we talk about, I'm just gonna be like, they're great too. Like, no one here is interchangeable with anyone else. Everyone's got their own identities, even if they're not as, like, over the top as, say, a Starscream or a Knockout. Everyone feels distinct from each other.
Yeah. Before we get into the other characters, I want to talk about the action and one of the signature things for the show that I really like. So, I think the action, pretty much all the way through, is fantastic. I think for the most part, it's really well choreographed, really well planned out. And all the fight scenes are just really dynamic. Like it's a 3D animated cartoon, so they can get away with the Autobots being more agile than they would be in real life. And I really like that. They do still feel like they have weight, but I like that they're a little more nimble and they feel like full on warriors. Like
yeah. And again. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Nick.
It's just, again, it's like, and I don't want to make this whole thing just comparing this show to the movies, but the thing that the action sequences in this show, like, really excel at, in a way that the movies still, I don't think, after 5 movies, have ever managed to get down, is that these are giant robots hitting each other, but they feel like they're taking damage, and they feel like people getting hurt. Like, in the movies, whenever the Transformers have a fight with each other, they just feel like hunks of metal, like, bumping into each other until one of them goes down. Here, it's like, even if we don't do the blue energon blood thing that we do occasionally, like, when someone takes a really bad hit, I go like, oh, I felt that. It's like, these are giant metal machines. I shouldn't be saying that when they, like, hit a rock or something, but it's like, oh no, like these people are like taking damage and getting hurt, and there's actual stakes to this fight beyond, say, if the human characters are there. It's like I feel like one of these people, like there's a sense of mortality to these guys that you would not immediately assume with giant metal characters.
Yeah, and there's always like what I appreciate with Daredevil, you know, how like they always keep continuity with their fights. Like Max still has bruises and cuts that he got from previous episodes, and they're a little more healed over each episode too, which I really like. And in this show, you'll see like RC get like scratched across the face, or Arachne get scratched across the face while she's fighting RC, and that cut stays there.
Yeah.
Speaking of RC and Arachnid, that's kind of a tangent storyline from the rest of the main story that I really like. That we have an arch nemesis for one of the individual Autobots. Well, Bulkhead also has one too, in the form of Breakdown. But RC is really interesting because it's because of Arachnid that she lost her first partner, and she has a bit of an issue letting people in because of that. Like she lost Tailgate because of Arachnid. She lost Cliff Jumper, and that obviously makes losing Jack just the thought of that just utterly terrifying for her. And that's also why when Smokescreen comes onto the scene, she's also really hesitant to let him be her partner.
Yeah, and it's like I like that in her relationship with Jack because it makes her initial like dismissal of him something other than, oh, you're just a human, what could you possibly contribute? Like she's not rejecting the idea of him as an equal on the principle of he can't fight and like do stuff, because Jack does contribute a lot. She rejects him on the basis of like, okay, the moment I accept you as my equal partner, then it's gonna hurt way worse once you once you inevitably get hit by someone.
Yeah, if he gets hurt or killed, it makes the impact of that all the much worse for her.
Yeah, but eventually she does get over that, and she does get to a place where she and Jack are like partners. And that's, for the most part, that's the human relationships with their respective Autobots, but especially her and Jack, they feel like two halves of a whole almost, and I really like that dynamic they have.
So do I. How do you feel about, I mean, it's not handled in a much different way than really anything else. Like, Raph knowing Bumblebee's, like, what he's saying based on that word, it's not really any different from Rocket knowing what I am Groot means every other time that Groot says it. So, I don't know, how do you feel about that in this show?
Well, okay, this is like a thing in other media, just to tangent onto like the I am Groot thing for a second, that I think makes it different here, is that for one, we don't know when Rocket and Groot found each other. Rocket could have had plenty of time to acclimate to that language. And the thing is, the general, like, rule of why Groot can only say I am Groot is because that's just how, like, his vocal chamber is structured. So, like, you have to go purely off inflection because that's the only sound he's capable of making, like, species-wise. With Bumblebee in this show, I'm kind of confused as to how anyone, human or Cybertronian, understands what he's saying. Because, like, the backstory we eventually get is that Megatron completely destroyed his vocal capacity, and Ratchet tried his best to fix it but couldn't really finish the job. And that haunts Ratchet for a while, and it's really interesting the way that we link those two characters and have that be a thing. But I don't know, everyone like, everyone Bumblebee knows prior to the start of this show understands him just fine, so I almost wonder why it's even a big deal outside of just the existential level of I don't even remember what my own voice sounds like, that kind of thing. But then Raph just immediately understands him with no explanation. That's weird to me. And it's not like a problem. I can just say, okay, it just is what it is. I just have to accept it, get over it. I'm fine doing that, go good. But I feel like, I don't know, like, we could have written an explanation for that. I don't think it would have been hard to explain.
I don't know what that explanation would have been, but yeah, it was kind of just one of those things, especially when I first watched the show. I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to have to suspend my disbelief and roll with it.
Like, you know what I think I could have done, just as like an off the top of my head, like, idea, is have him not be able to understand Bumblebee initially, and then we do one of those, like, mind link things, get Raphael involved with that somehow, and then they come out of it and he can understand it.
The psychic patch thing? That's only designed for robots. It's not like the Matrix where just any human can jack into it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Other big things I want to talk about. Oh yeah. I think the end of season 1 was, well, actually, before I even get there, but just the way we start the show is really good. We do basically a 5-parter mini movie with the Dark Energon storyline.
Yeah. This series does, like, a lot of very lengthy multi-part stories, and I don't know, like, that's a really bold move, I think, especially for the beginning and end of the first season, where this is a show on a network for kids, and kids might potentially, like, they'd be more acclimated to episodic storytelling, and starting and ending your seasons on something so serialized might alienate them. But I don't know, it works really well.
It does. Like, even as a kid, I was like, well, I gotta know what happens after this.
Yeah, and it makes it really easy to binge, and really it's that structure kind of carries through the whole show, where there's not really any self-contained episodes. There's a couple of plots, like, especially when we're just out doing sort of missions where we just encounter the Decepticons and kind of have our tussle and then we go our separate ways. Those episodes are kind of standalone, but for the most part, the show is really, really good at every episode matters and nothing is filler. Everything comes back in the end. And, I don't know, I suppose the one exception to that is, ironically, Arachnid as a character. Like, she's there to service RC's character development, and she does that really well. And when she's present for, like, the Decepticons at the base and stuff, she contributes nicely to the sort of, like, weird infighting politics that makes the Decepticons so interesting to watch. But she is the one loose end that we never, ever get tied up, and I find that kind of strange.
So do I. But I do want to sidetrack something I want to mention real quick before I forget about it. The signature thing I was talking about earlier. In Spectacular Spider-Man, they have, like, this signature sound effect for every time Spider-Man shoots a web, and I really like it. And they have the same thing for every time a Transformer transforms in this show. It's a really simple thing, but I really like the noise that we get every time a Transformer transforms in this series.
And we have a little thing in again in that sort of clip show episode with Megatron and Starscream, where Starscream's like, I always did transform with style, and I'm like, you know what he did? Like, Starscream's transformations are always the best.
Yeah, I remember the very first time, I want to say the very first time we saw one is, I want to say either the second or the third part of the first two-parter, where the Autobots are in an energon mine, and Starscream jumps in the tube that's sucking up the remaining containers.
Yeah.
It forms and flies out of it. That's one of the coolest
It's so
shots on the show.
It's so cool.
And I do like that we get those recap episodes to like refresh you on things that have happened throughout the show. Like we do one with Agent Fowler. He basically spends an entire episode recapping everything, and then we do the same thing with Starscream when he and Megatron have the psychic patch.
Yeah, and it's just like I really appreciate the execution of both of those, because lots of times shows will do clip shows where they're like nested within an episode set in the present. But this one, like these two episodes were really like necessary, and the fact that they go back and look at what's already happened doesn't feel remotely forced, because they're accomplishing things that I think the show needs and stuff that I was curious about, where it's like with the Agent Fowler one, you could say on paper where it's like, okay, we have an episode about Agent Fowler like debriefing the government, so that it's like that's the excuse to give us the clip show to catch up the audience. But it's like, no, I was wondering the whole time, like, okay, what is like the agency Fowler works for and the rest of the government, what do they think is going on, and what is like their perception of events, and how do they view the Decepticons and the Autobots? And that episode gives us that. And then the Megatron and Starscream one is, okay, we don't really, until that episode, get into Megatron's like mindset of like, what does Starscream's actions look like to him, and how does he view that, and what is their relationship really? And so, like, it's not just, oh, it's convenient that we have those to catch people up. Like, I would not get rid of those episodes if given the choice, just because they're contributing. They're not just spinning their wheels.
I wouldn't either. And I think this show is masterful at, like, it knows how to kick off a season, and it knows how to close one out. Like, the ending for season 1, where they defeat Unicron, but Optimus Prime loses his memory, is so epic. That whole 3-parter was just so cool.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that Unicron, like, just, he is the Earth, like the Earth formed around him, and so if he were to ever awaken, the Earth would be ripped apart as he transforms.
Yeah. And like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit slightly sad that we never do just like full-on Planet Unicron, because that's part of the appeal of Unicron to me, is that he's a transformer who transforms into a planet. Like, that immediately is just so cool. But like,
but that's the thing with this show, because in the continuity that they've come up with, Unicron never transformed. You can't ever do a story on Earth again because you just destroyed it.
yeah. And it's like, I know people who saw, was it the 4th one or the 5th movie? I think it was the most recent, the 5th movie, where it's like, what? The entire planet is a transformer? How does that make sense? I'm like, yeah, okay, you know what? That is a silly idea, but the way we treat it here, it's like, okay, you know what? It felt kind of earned, kind of built to. It doesn't immediately contradict anything like the movies do. So I'm like, I suppose they cribbed this from this show, or maybe this show cribbed Unicron being Earth from another iteration, but it's like, you kind of missed the point, guys.
And speaking of the movies, while we're on this topic, Alex Kurtzman is an executive producer on this show, and he was actually I don't know. I feel like, based on like the behind the scenes stuff that I first saw for the show, I want to say he was actually a fairly integral part of it and wasn't just an executive producer in name only. But he doesn't have a co-creator or writer credit on the show at all. So I don't know. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But you know, he's tied to the first two Transformers movies, as well as the Amazing Spider-Man 2. He was a writer on all three of those films, and an executive producer on Amazing Spider-Man 2. And this is by far the best thing that he's ever been a part of, just looking at his filmography.
Which as mean as this is to say, immediately makes me assume that he didn't have any involvement with the writing. Where it's like, if he just oversees it and maybe is occasionally throwing out an idea or two and then people write around that, that seems to me like the most he could have possibly contributed, because the rest of his track record is not like even half as... Okay, I'm gonna look through what else he's done just because I'm not intimately familiar with all of his work. But off the top of my head, I can't think of anything else he's been involved in that's even like half as good as this show.
He was also a writer on Watchmen and the first Star Trek film.
Yeah, that's... Let's see, I'm just looking through stuff. Well, okay, I liked Now You See Me. I'll give him that too. I haven't seen Now You See Me 2 yet, but
yeah, he was a producer on that film. And I really like that movie too.
Yeah, it's a very hit and miss. Mostly misses with this guy, but he's got this to his name, so he should be proud of that.
And yeah, moving to season 2, like, I remember like when I was a kid and I first saw the trailer that they put out for it, and like they ended, it was just like a little teaser. They ended on a shot of Optimus Prime getting the Decepticon symbol branded onto his shoulder, and I was like, wow.
Which, by the way, the one thing that regardless of Transformers Incarnation, is that the Decepticon symbol is infinitely better than the Autobot symbol. Like, I'm sometimes tempted to say that I would join the Decepticons just to get their cool symbol.
That's just such an iconic, haunting image to see Optimus Prime with the bad guy's symbol on his shoulder.
Yeah, it's slightly less haunting in context, I think.
Yeah.
Already at that point in the story, he's already having reservations.
And we know that's not going to stick, but it's just it's a really cool shot.
Yeah. But it's like when Optimus wakes up initially, and he's like, Megatronus, what are we doing here? And you can see the wheels turning in Megatron's head, where he's like, oh. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? That's how you ended the season? I'm glad I'm watching this now. I don't think I could have survived waiting months to have that resolved.
And then we resolve it with the 3-parter for season 3 in such an epic way, and we have Jack and RC go to Cybertron. And the build-up to all that, I think, was great. One of my favorite moments with RC, this is early on when they're trying to figure out where Optimus is. They're attacking the Decepticons, and the Decepticons, they ground bridge away, and RC says, you know what, screw it, I'm going after them. She goes after them, and she winds up on the Decepticon warship. She's fighting her way through hordes of Decepticons all by herself, and then she gets one down on the ground alone and whips out her the blades that come out of her forearm, and she's like, where is Optimus? Answer me. And then Soundwave shows up, and RC transforms into a bike and drives after him, and instead of even engaging in a battle, Soundwave just ground bridges her away somewhere in the Arctic. And RC just lets out this rageful scream, and it's just like, she is so fed up with like not having their leader, and it's just like she tried her best to like squeeze some information out of someone, and she got nowhere. And I don't know, that moment just really stuck out to me.
Yeah, like that is firstly just a really awesome showcase of like prowess on her part. Or I guess if we want to really show how awesome an Autobot is, just put them alone on the Mega, or even the humans. If we just want to show how cool a good guy is, strand them on the Decepticon warship and see how they survive. Because we do that with her, we do that with all three of the humans at one point, plus Agent Fowler, where they have to like, sort of fix like the weird AI that's taken over the warship and then get out of there. And they manage to do it, and it's great. And then my favorite example is Smokescreen, who like pilfers all of the keys off the ship, and it's like he's taking advantage of the phase shifter. And that is one of my favorite sequences in the whole show, is just him just busting out of there and leaving everyone in the dust. Like, what just happened?
And there's so many cool moments like that in this show. And the final, well, not final, actually, yeah, it is the final like showdown in the first three-parter of season 1, where Optimus Prime and Megatron are fighting in front of the volcano with the Dark Energon.
Yeah.
And Optimus Prime like flings Megatron off of a cliff, and then when he lands on him, he shifts his leg so that the wheels are turning, and then like grinds into Megatron's face. He like tires on Megatron's face.
Yeah, like we really take much advantage possible of the transforming thing beyond just like getting places, because that's usually just what we do it for. Is that okay? Get to a new location, turn into a car, turn into a thing, and fly off. And it's just like, yeah, like we're really thinking about the designs of these characters and how they would play in the fight scenes. And it's just, the people working on the show are so smart with like this premise.
And this, as much as like Spectacular Spider-Man feels like a show that was made by Spider-Man fans, this is a show through and through that feels like it was made by Transformers fans.
Yep, 100%.
And like once we finally figure out that Cybertron is where we need to go, I love that Jack and RC are the ones to go, especially since not only is Jack the one that Optimus picks when he gives the Matrix to him, but well, not the Matrix,
Isn't it the Matrix?
Oh yeah, it is the Matrix. I'm sorry. Yeah, when he gives him the Matrix right before he leaves to go fight with Megatron and all the other Autobots to save the Earth from Unicron, and he picked Jack for that. But also, Jack and RC are arguably the main pairing in terms of human and an Autobot. They're the first ones that get paired up, and we kind of follow them more. Well, maybe I would say, yeah, a little bit more so than we do Miko and Bulkhead, and especially Raph and Bumblebee. Yeah, those two are like the emotional focal point, and so I like that they're the ones that go. And we set up Scraplets very early on in season 1, so I like that that's how Jack is able to take down the Insecticon without RC's help.
Yeah, and that's a great thing of like the Scraplet episode by itself could be a standalone thing. Like, I could imagine another show never making use of the Scraplets again. Just like we had a cool idea for an episode, but this show will come back to them, I think, more than once. And it's like, okay, now they don't just feel like a cool idea. They feel like part of the mythos. Like, these are real creatures that were like part of Cybertron's ecosystem, and they're really playing into this conflict. And it's like, it's really cool.
Yeah. And the Insecticons are really cool. I think they presented a really interesting threat. Because aside from basically Soundwave and Megatron, the Decepticons don't really have bronze at this point. They have the numbers, but they don't have. Well, I mean, they have Breakdown. He's their muscle essentially.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Having the Insecticons just gives them that extra edge, and gives the Autobots even more than a large obstacle to try to hurdle over. And
then eventually, like towards the end of season 2, they get rid of them and what I appreciate about the whole show is that there's a really, really fine balance between the Autobots winning and the Decepticons winning. There's a real sense of back and forth that makes the conflict feel even more warlike and more real, because you really never know who's going to come out on top at the end of the day, and both sides are constantly suffering losses, and the Decepticons have their constant infighting, and so it's always a push-pull of like who's ahead, who's behind.
So when we finally are able to get not Megatron, when we get Optimus his memories back, the Autobots are still way behind the curve because Orion Pax already decrypted a lot of Decepticon files for them, and so like pretty much the rest of season 2 is like a race to get these artifacts to try to get the upper hand on the other side, and more often than not, the Autobots are constantly losing. I like that they're able to snag most of them, or pretty much all of them by the end. But we spend most of the season with them trying to get these artifacts, and for one reason or another, they're constantly losing one. And we get to the episode where Optimus gets that special sword.
Yeah.
He gets the Star Saber, and I love that. In the episode where Megatron, like, this is the thing about Megatron, he's so smart and underhanded. He's willing to do whatever it takes to win. He goes back to Cybertron and desecrates one of the burial grounds of the Primes to have one of their arms attached to him so that he can use the Forge, because only a Prime can use it. He uses the Forge to make himself a Star Saber made out of Dark Energon. And the very first time that they fight and he uses it, he completely shatters Optimus Prime Star Saber.
Like, much like an oh no moment, because we see the Star Saber in action and it's like, okay, how could anyone possibly compete with that? Like, that thing alone could destroy the warship with like a couple of slices. And then immediately it's gotten rid of, and I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, this show constantly, it's subverting your expectations, you know? I thought once they got that, I'm like, oh wow, they're gonna win. They finally got the upper hand. And the next episode, Megatron's like, nope. Just destroys it. And you're with Optimus Prime as you see it shattered in slow motion. You're just like, oh my god. And when we finally get to the end, they've managed to snag all the artifacts, and they're using it to fight off the Decepticons and try to restart their planet. But they capture their kids. They get Jack, they get Nico, and they get Raphael. and that's what's like that's what causes them to drop their weapons and throw in the towel. And it's Megatron who almost gets to restart the planet, but then Optimus destroys the Omega Lock, and they can't fix their planet. And I love the consequences of every choice that's made throughout this show. Like this show, it has such a strong command of narrative and cause and effect. Like there is, like no one can fully win, and no one can fully lose. At least, like that's how it's playing out for most of this show, and then particularly in season 2. Like they really, and like we take the Autobots to their lowest point by the end. Like the Decepticons find out where their base is, and they destroy their base. And the last shot that we're left with for season 2 is Optimus Prime's hand out of the rubble.
Like, I thought for sure that he was actually dead at that point, and then later it finds out he's just really, really badly beaten, and I'm like, okay, they actually got me for a while there.
And I just thought that was such an epic and bold way to close out the season. I love that. I love strong cliffhangers and strong openings for seasons, because it makes it feel like it gives it kind of a cinematic quality to me, where it's like we're telling a long form story as opposed to all episodic. Like we started off really strong, serialized, and then we close it out serialized, and we give you a really strong, powerful cliffhanger.
I suppose, I don't know if you want to then talk about how the show ends or Predacon Rise.
I want to talk a little bit about season 3 before we get into Predacons Rising or the ending. Yeah, how'd you feel about season 3 as a piece overall?
Overall, I think I don't necessarily see the need to do the rebranding with like Beast Hunters. Like I don't know why we couldn't have just had it be, more season 3. Like it's half the episodes, so I don't know, maybe something happened behind the scenes, maybe it was for marketing purposes. But yeah, it doesn't feel like a different show at all. It just feels like more of the same great show. It's like it's exactly what you would kind of figure season 3 would be. And
I figure that we do the rebranding thing more for selling the toys, maybe. Not entirely sure, or just so that we can sell more toys. And we have the excuse of it's under a slightly different name. It Transformers Prime Beast Hunters, and we can release a whole new toy line with that, because we do change Bumblebee's paint job, and we have all these Predacons that weren't there before, as well as an updated Optimus.
Yeah. But it's just okay, so like the show ends and it's a pretty decent enough ending. And what I have with Predacon Rising is kind of, it feels like this show's equivalent to Full Metal Alchemist Conqueror of Shambhala. Like, remind me, have you watched the original Full Metal Alchemist anime?
I believe so, but I only watched that through once and have no memory of it, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's one of my all-time favorite shows. Anyone who hasn't watched it should definitely check it out. And the way that show ends, it's an ending. There's a couple of things that are left hanging, but they're very intentional. It's sort of like, things are kind of bittersweet, not everything can be fully resolved, that's just how it is. And for the most part, things are concluded. And then the movie comes and it kind of serves almost like an epilogue, where it's like, okay, this is the real ending, and you can kind of take or leave it. You can kind of say that the show ended where the show ended, or you can say the show ended with the movie. And I have that with this, where it's like, did I need Predacon Rising? Not really. I suppose it's good to have it just to have that extra layer of finality, but outside of the fact that Optimus, in the end, like the tail end, sacrifices himself to get Cybertron back up and running, for the most part, where we end with that movie is kind of where you figured we would end.
Yeah, I think. Well, but before I get into my thoughts on Predacon Rising and the ending, I just want to talk about Beast Hunters as a whole, the season, and then we can get into the ending. So, I like Beast Hunters. I don't think it's bad by any means. I do think it is really good, but I do think, as a whole, it's oddly weaker than the first two seasons, at least in my opinion. I don't mean that. I don't think it's significantly weaker, but I would say it is weaker compared to the first two seasons, even though it's shorter.
Well, if you had to attribute that to say was the cause of it.
I would say kind of the way we decided to go, just plot-wise, because the Predacons thing feels like an excuse to rebrand. And so, like, because when you get into the show, we keep doing, we got to find more Predacon bones so that we can manufacture more Predacons on a large scale. And then we don't do that. So it almost feels like a red herring. Because we build up to it, and then Megatron decides, no, these guys, they're going to become sentient, and they're too much of a threat, and they're too much more powerful than me and my Legion, so we got to stamp them out. Or, better yet, let the Autobots do it for us. So, I don't know. I feel like to have all that build up and then not follow through with it, like we did with the artifacts in season 2, felt a little underwhelming to me. But I did still like the season overall.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming. I didn't take that as a problem, just because, like, it is a little bit contrived that Megatron is like so gung ho about using the Predacons and then turns against it so hard, so quick. But I don't know, it never stopped being compelling to me. Like, it didn't feel like wasted time. Especially once we get to Predacon Rising, and, like, that plot element is still very much in play, and, like, the Predaking is an active, like, player in events. Like, I don't know, I didn't have a problem with it. I can see where you're coming from, though. Like, that's a big foundational part of the plot of the season, and it feels kind of like a cul-de-sac.
Yeah, I really like, okay, I'm gonna talk about aesthetics again. I like, I like Bumblebee's new paint job. I think the predominantly black, followed by the secondary yellow, is really cool. And I like the way the Predacon looks. Yeah, it looks really threatening and menacing. It's just a really cool, intricate design. And I like that we have him become sentient, and he's got like a mind of his own, and he has his own ambitions of being king of the Predacons and all that. Yeah, story-wise, I think I do agree with you, though. It is pretty compelling all the way through. But overall, as a package, I found to be not quite up to snuff with the first two seasons. Still very good, just not as good as the first two seasons.
That the decrease, which means we have kind of less to do.
You make a fair point there. But now I'd like to get into the ending. So we've been like echoing this two sides of the same coin thing with Megatron and Optimus just in the opening titles of the show, when we see them run towards each other and punch each other, which foreshadows that big fight that they have towards the end of season 1. Yeah, we're always doing the yin and yang, good versus evil, Megatron, and Optimus type deal. And I like that we completely subvert that with having Bumblebee be the one that kills Megatron.
Yeah, and like you made a point earlier about how, like, because really all of the Autobots, minus like the newcomers like Wheeljack and Smokescreen and Ultra Magnus, all of the Autobots that we start with have kind of their archenemy or evil opposite on the Decepticon side, where we have Bulkhead and Breakdown, we have Ratchet and Knockout, we have RC and Arachnid, and really, Megatron is weirdly enough the nemesis for both Optimus and Bumblebee. Like, we set it up early that Megatron is the guy who ruined Bumblebee's voice box, and I didn't make note of this earlier, but it's a testament to like the character writing that I feel like even before he starts talking, I have a very clear like sense of what Bumblebee's character is. Again, something that we don't get in the movies because he's very inconsistent there and kind of just almost like an animal. But in this show, like the way people talk about him and talk to him and react to him, I get a clear sense of Bumblebee's character. But yeah, like it doesn't feel like it's out of nowhere to have him be the one who takes out Megatron in the end. And like symbolically, that's when he gets his voice back. It's like, I don't know, like that feels earned in the same way that Optimus doing it would have.
Also, I can't believe I completely skipped over his death fake out. I absolutely love that, and I lost my mind when I saw that for the first time as a kid.
Yeah, I thought they went through with it.
Like I had a Tony Stark getting stabbed in the chest by Thanos reaction to that as a kid.
Yeah, because Megatron like takes his shots, and it goes into slow-mo, and my immediate assumption is like, okay, they wouldn't slow this moment down if he wasn't gonna like dodge it or narrowly evade it somehow. And then it makes contact, and I'm like, oh no! And then the next one hits him, and then the next one, and I'm like, oh, that's bad.
And then he's revived by Synthetic Energon. And again, another beautiful setup and payoff moment. Like the show's constantly doing that. It's setting stuff up, and it's going to pay that off and use it later. And so it really doesn't feel contrived that Bumblebee survives that, because he lands in the pool of Synthetic Energon, and it restores him immediately.
Yeah, which I forgot that was even a possibility, so I wasn't even thinking on that level.
I mean, I wasn't thinking about it either, but the second you see Bumblebee come back and he's healed, like, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And, yes, oh, wait, unless you had anything else, I guess...
Yeah, I wanted to, talk about, Megatron. So... Yep. From the looks of it, it looked like he completely burned up on re-entry, and then we see, because he's falling back down towards the planet after Bumblebee stabs him, but we see in Predacons Rising that then wasn't the case. He just got burned up a bit, but his body held up, and I think it's really contrived, because he had Dark Energon running through his veins for a while, but he had stopped using Dark Energon for a while at that point, and he didn't have any in his chest when Bumblebee killed him. So it struck me as pretty contrived that Unicron is able to strike this connection with him when he doesn't actively have any Dark Energon inside him anymore. And I really didn't like that, you know, we're going to give this show an epilogue where the villain... I mean, Unicron is ostensibly the villain, but he's carrying everything out physically through a mind-controlled puppet. And Megatron is kind of arguing with him and fighting for his control the whole way through. But I don't know. That wasn't very compelling to watch. It was kind of tedious to watch. And I think that's the biggest reason that I have a hard time liking Predacons Rising as a true end to the show. I love Optimus dying to restore Cybertron. That's a beautiful moment. But I don't know if I needed to sit through an hour of a mind-controlled Megatron trying to kill Cybertron just to see that.
Okay, see, that's where you and I are going to disagree, because I actually really enjoyed that. And, because, again, there's a lot of characters and things going on in that movie. Megatron being, like, mind-controlled by Unicron, and Unicron, like, acting through him. He is the antagonist of that movie, but there's a lot of other stuff happening in that, like, hour at a time. So, I don't think, like, that sort of dynamic between them, like, overruns everything else. And even if it did, like, I like what we do with it, where Megatron is almost kind of doing the Starscream thing, where he's just kind of... Unicron is like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And Megatron is just kind of trying to subtly spin it to where it's, we are going to do this, and we are going to accomplish our goals. And Unicron just gives him zero, like, leeway. Like, he gives him no room to run with that. Where he makes no bones about the fact that Megatron is his slave, and we'll have the occasional scene where Megatron will, like, try to do something cunning to sort of get them both destroyed. What I love is that Megatron has a thing where he says, I'd rather me be in charge of, like, my own twisted, broken corpse than be your slave. And I'm like, yep, that's that character, that's really smart. Versus, say, again, the thing that Kurtzman was involved in that you mentioned, Revenge of the Fallen, where Megatron's
Megatron suddenly has someone over him that he answers to, and I don't think that makes sense for Megatron at all.
And in his first line in that scene, I mean, his first lines in that movie are like, Megatron answers to no one. And then the Fallen shows up and he's like, hey, Fallen, let me answer to you. Let me do your bidding, master. And it's like, no, Megatron is the guy who would literally rather die than be anyone's, like, servant. And then we get to the end of the movie and Megatron is basically surrendered. He's like, you know what? Being someone's slave with, like, zero agency or control of my own, I kind of don't want to do that to other people anymore. The Decepticons are done. I'm out of here. Peace. And I'm like, wow, I never thought I would buy Megatron just sort of, like, essentially turning over a new leaf and just saying, like, I'm just gonna go be on my own. Essentially the comic book Thanos thing of, like, alright, my malevolence didn't pan out so great, I'm just gonna hang out on a farm for a bit. But I completely buy it. And, like, I think we needed to spend as much time as we did with Megatron and Unicron, like, lording over him, so that I believe Megatron when he says, you know what, no, that was terrible. I'm not gonna do that to anyone else.
You know what, I agree with that. I do like that we get Megatron to a place at the end where he's like, you know what, I don't want to be a tyrant anymore. And he just flies off.
And starts again, like, what just happened? What am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah, I guess I don't have anything to do anymore.
He's like, we all have lots to think about. And so he just leaves and goes straight for the throne. And then the Predaking is like, haha, nope.
Yeah, and I think that's the end of Starscream as a character. I don't see, even with like all the conning and begging that he's done throughout this series, there's no way he talks, walks, or even fights his way out of that situation.
Yeah, he's dead. Which is kind of a shame because this is my favorite version of Starscream, and he's so cool, and it's kind of sad to think that he almost made it to the end of the entire thing, like surviving, and then at the last second he's just gutted dead. But it's oddly satisfying and at the same time kind of sad.
Yeah, now the more that I'm thinking about it, the more that we're talking about it, I do like that we have kind of a double end. I am kind of conflicted ultimately about Predacons Rising. I can't say wholly whether I would say that it's necessary. I mean, it does a lot for Megatron when you finally get to the end, and again, just Optimus Prime sacrificing himself for the restoration of Cybertron is such a powerful and beautiful moment. But also, the ending that they gave us with the Autobots just going back to Cybertron is also really emotional and powerful. Like they're leaving the kids. Like they say they'll maybe pop back down once in a blue moon, or they can come to Cybertron every now and then. But like ostensibly, they're going back to their home planet to repair it. And by and large, like they're kind of done just being on Earth. And that's a really powerful thing, and you can have that be your ending, or you can have Predacons Rising be your true ending, and both work.
Yeah.
You can cut off the series at either point, and I think it's still just as emotionally impactful.
I will say, I was kind of expecting the humans to play some kind of role in Predacon Rising, although thinking about where we ended up, I'm not sure how you do that, but like going in, I was like, okay, this is like your big finale epilogue movie. Like, those are big characters. It only makes sense that they would come back for a bit, right? And then they didn't, and I'm like, you know what? It's fine. But a moment that's just as powerful to me as Optimus sacrificing himself is right before that. He says to the assembled Autobots, because we kind of have this thing like with Smokescreen and then with Bumblebee and kind of with RC and with everyone to a bit, where it's like, okay, who's really the leader when Optimus is gone? Or like, who's worthy of being a new Prime? And Optimus kind of looks at all of them and says, like, you've each proven yourselves worthy of being a Prime in different ways. And I'm like, you know what? That's really true. And that shows to me like how great the balance of the cast in this show was, where it's like, yeah, you know what? I could see Smokescreen being a new Prime, or Bumblebee, or RC, or even Bulkhead, or even Jack, where it's like we've really made sure that all of the good guys and all of the characters on the Autobot side really have a moment of like, they are as noble and as like strong of character as Optimus is, and we keep hammering that in. And we haven't really talked about Optimus as his own character much, but the main thing that sticks out with him for me is like, we don't do what some other iterations might do, where it's just like, Optimus is the end-all be-all, like once he's gone, we kind of have to replace him or find a way to keep like his sort of character going. Where it's like, no, you know what? Everyone here is worthy, and everyone here contributes just as much as Optimus does, and it really was a group effort, and everyone is as good of a person as he is. And that's a really powerful idea to me. It is slightly undercut by the fact that Knockout is there. How do you feel about the fact that we end with Knockout on the Autobot side, kind of arbitrarily?
Yeah, I'm not in love with that. Especially because he's threatened like the kids multiple times and has had like his like razor blade attachment like slowly like going towards one of the kids at multiple points through this show. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I know he's like he was just, as he says, thought he was just playing for the winning team, but I don't know. I don't love that. If we'd somehow been able to tell the stories throughout the show as is, without having him nearly kill the kids at any point, I'd be more okay with it.
Yeah. I think the thing is, like, again, as far as the Decepticons go, he's kind of like the comic relief. So, like, I see working on it and being like, okay, he's kind of too endearing to the audience, even at the bad. I don't want to kill him the way that we're going to do with Starscream. And we can't really just have him go off and do his own thing like Megatron. So where does that leave us? Like, he's either just their prisoner forever, and that's kind of harsh, or he does what's in character for him to do and be like, you know what, screw this, I want to live, and just side with the winning team. And so, I don't know, it's really weird, because he is a character that I could see getting to that place eventually, had we seeded it earlier in the show. But having it just kind of be an arc in the context of this movie, where he goes from prisoner of war to like, alright, I'll stick around because it's convenient, and then to the end where it's like, I guess I'm here now. It's just a weird little thing to do with him, I think.
Yeah, and I'm not in love with it. Again, I'm kind of leaning towards just the regular series ending. I love Optimus' death and everything you said about how, like, all of his teammates are worthy of being primed. That really stuck out to me in the last viewing that I saw of it, and kind of reminded me of the end of Buffy, where she kind of says everyone can have the power, every woman can have the power of a Slayer. It was kind of like that, only we didn't have an actual MacGuffin to follow through with that. It was just a sentiment. Like, we didn't need every single Autobot their own Matrix. Optimus just says it and then goes off to restore the planet.
Yeah. Okay, so I have my issue with Knockout, like, joining them at the end, but I think my favorite joke in the whole show is toward the end of the last episode, when everything's kind of settled, Megatron's been killed, Starscream and Shockwave are retreating, and the team is just like looking out to Cybertron. They're finally back home. And then he just cuts to Knockout and he's like, look at the luster. And everyone just silently stares at him. And he's like, what? I'm joining the winning team. And then Bumblebee just punches him in the face. That had me laughing for like minutes on end. I had to pause the episode because I was laughing so hard.
Yeah, the show's full of great moments like that.
Yeah, it's really funny. Like, we didn't talk much about the humor, but this is also a really, really funny show.
This is one of those shows that I want to go back and just rewatch again, just so that I can know it inside out. But it's weird. Nothing's really coming to me, but I completely agree with you. I just can't pick out a moment right off.
Yeah, I don't know, like, I guess kind of hit everything I wanted to hit. I guess just, it's kind of a shame that this just left Netflix, because I've already firmly decided. You know that I really, really love a show when I decide that I'm going to sit my mom and my sister down with it. Well, like, if I think a show is really great, then I will make sure that they watch it beginning to end, and I've decided I'm going to do that with this show. Which I never expected I would say about a Transformers anything, but that really is how good this is.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I'm really disappointed this is off Netflix now. Like, literally as we're recording, the day we're recording this, it's just been taken off Netflix. And Netflix is constantly pushing out more and more original content, so it only makes sense that they would have to excise some stuff. There's only so many shows they can have on one streaming service at once. But I don't know. I really wish this could have stuck around because, these days when you try to recommend an entire series to someone, they ask one of 3 questions: Is it on Netflix? Is it on Hulu? Is it on Amazon? And if the answer to every single one of those questions is no, then most people aren't likely to go out of their way to buy it or rent it.
Although, I think that's slightly the problem with animated stuff. Because just in my experience, people are much more willing to just straight up pirate animated shows.
Fair enough. I do want to say, if you want to just buy the first season and see where you like it from there, it is only $10 with an Amazon Prime membership. That's actually a really good deal.
And it is totally worth it. Like, you are not gonna watch the first season of the show and then be like, I don't want to watch the rest. Just trust us, okay? It's good.
All right. Well, that's pretty much it. This was our discussion of the Transformers Prime TV series.
Yeah. And now to talk about something completely different. But you won't be getting that for a little bit. So for now, bye-bye.